The spooky tale today took place in a forest located in Kanchanaburi province, Thailand. The entire incident began suddenly one day when villagers, who routinely went into the forest to forage for resources, mysteriously disappeared. This alarming event prompted a group of hunters who lived within the village to band together and search for the missing villagers. As the hunters followed the trail of the vanished villagers, they ventured deep into the forest until they reached an area that local villagers referred to as the Cursed Forest Zone. It was here that they encountered events so terrifying and inexplicable that the tale became known as "Don't Touch It." Before we dive into our scary story, we would like to ask everyone to like and subscribe to support us in continuing to bring you more terrifying tales in the future. For today's story, we delve into the tale of an old man named Mill. This incident happened long ago, approximately 60 years in the past. At the time, Mill was a teenager living in a small, remote village deep within the forests of Kanchanaburi province, near the border with Myanmar. The primary occupation of the villagers was hunting and gathering forest resources to sell. In those days, the area was covered with dense, lush forests, teeming with diverse plant life and abundant wildlife. Mill, as a young boy, was just beginning to learn the art of hunting. He frequently accompanied seasoned hunters into the forest to learn techniques and gain experience. One essential aspect of survival for Mill was learning mystical chants and incantations. These skills were vital for anyone entering the forest, as it was fraught with dangers, including wild animals and supernatural entities. Without protective spells, it was nearly impossible to return safely from the deep forest. Mill understood that every hunting trip required careful preparation and utmost caution. The unpredictability of the forest meant that danger could take any form. One day, two middle-aged villagers ventured into the forest to gather resources and did not return. By the third day, there was still no sign of them, causing alarm within the village. A group of hunters volunteered to enter the forest to search for the missing men. Mill eagerly requested to join them. Among the group of hunters was a man named Seth, renowned for his exceptional tracking skills. Seth was the leader who would guide the others deep into the forest. The search party consisted of 5 members, including Mill. After gathering supplies, they set out at dawn. The forest they entered was a dense, humid rainforest. After walking for some distance, they began to find traces that could belong to the missing villagers. Seth observed the tracks and remarked to the group that something seemed off. There were only 2 missing men, yet the footprints they found suggested more than 2 people had been there. Seth warned everyone to stay vigilant and not let their guard down. The group continued following the trail through the forest until they reached a stream. It was nearing noon, so they decided to stop and prepare a meal. Mill took on the task of cooking for the group. While they ate, Seth voiced his concerns. He mentioned that the tracks seemed to fade as they went deeper into the forest, almost as if someone had deliberately erased them. Another hunter chimed in, suggesting that if this was the case, the 2 missing men might have been abducted. The group began speculating and worrying, but Seth calmed them down, insisting they stay focused. He reassured them that the men might simply be lost in the forest. Seth urged everyone to finish their meal quickly so they could resume their search before nightfall. As they continued their journey, Seth handed Mill a sacred amulet, or takrut, and told him to wear it around his neck. Mill gladly accepted the talisman, believing it to be a powerful protective charm, especially coming from a skilled hunter like Seth. They trekked deeper into the forest and eventually came across a new clue, a shoulder bag that likely belonged to one of the missing villagers. The hunters inspected the bag thoroughly and confirmed it belonged to the missing men. "Does this mean we're on the right track, Seth?" one of the hunters asked. The group agreed to search the surrounding area for more evidence. They spent some time investigating the vicinity but found nothing beyond the bag. The group of hunters continued following the trail, but eventually, they arrived at the edge of a vast forest where all traces disappeared. In front of them lay another stream, shallow and filled with rocks and small islands. Beyond the stream, the forest became even denser and more foreboding. At the stream's edge, there were bamboo poles tied with red cloth. These were markers placed by villagers who ventured into the forest, signifying the boundary to the cursed forest. This forest was notorious in local lore. Villagers claimed that no one who crossed into its depths ever returned. Mill had heard stories about the cursed forest before, but he always thought they were just tales. In his memory, he couldn't recall a single person ever entering that part of the forest. As the sun began to set, the hunters discussed their next steps. Continuing further into the forest in the dark would be too dangerous. They decided to retreat and set up camp on a nearby hill, not far from the stream. Once they reached the hill, the group began setting up camp, starting a fire and preparing for the night. Mill took on his usual duties of gathering firewood and cooking. When night fell, Seth cautioned Mill once again. "Listen, kid, the forest at night is pitch black and eerily quiet. It's easy to get spooked or hear things that aren't there. If you hear or see anything strange, don't panic. Keep your head straight and stay calm." The hunters then lay down to rest, taking turns keeping watch. Mill volunteered for the first shift, sitting by the fire. As everyone else slept, the silence of the forest was absolute, just as Seth had described. Mill sat by the fire, feeding it logs to keep it burning. Suddenly, he heard something, voices. It sounded like people talking, coming from the forest below the hill where they were camped. Startled, Mill stood up and strained his ears, trying to pinpoint the source of the voices. Though he stared into the dark forest for a long time, he saw nothing. The mysterious voices grew clearer, piquing his curiosity and causing him to forget Seth's warning entirely. Determined to investigate, he grabbed a lantern and descended the hill, heading toward the forest where the voices seemed to originate. The closer he got, the louder the voices became. They sounded like a group of people having a conversation. Yet no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't make out any of the words. Mill convinced himself that the voices might belong to the two missing villagers. Holding the lantern, he quietly approached the direction of the sound. Suddenly, a shadowy figure, resembling a human, darted in front of him. Startled, Mill stumbled and fell. Quickly regaining his composure, he grabbed the lantern and shone its light toward where the shadow had passed. To his shock, he saw a middle-aged man standing there. The man was dressed like a villager and, judging by his appearance, matched the description of one of the missing men. Mill, however, wasn't personally familiar with the missing villagers. Only the other hunters had described their features. but from what he had heard, he was convinced this man was one of them. Mill called out to the man, asking, "Uncle, are you from the village? Are you one of the men who came into the forest?" The man nodded and replied, "Yes, we're the ones you're looking for. My friend is injured not far from here. Could you help carry him back to your camp?" Before Mill could respond, the man turned and started crossing the stream into the cursed forest. He paused, looked back, and shouted, "Hey boy, what are you waiting for? Hurry up. If we don't move quickly, my friend will be dead before you get there." Mill hesitated for a moment but ultimately decided to follow, thinking it was his duty to help, and with the injured man supposedly nearby, he crossed the stream and trailed the man into the dense forest. As they walked, Mill began to feel uneasy. The forest was incredibly dark, yet the man leading him didn't have a lantern or any source of light. Despite this, the man navigated the path with ease. Mill, even with his lantern, stumbled over roots and rocks. Suspicion grew in Mill's mind, and he deliberately slowed his pace, keeping some distance between them. Then, something happened that made his hair stand on end. The man walked straight into a massive tree ahead of them and vanished. Mill froze. He realized he was no longer dealing with an ordinary human. At that moment, Seth's warning echoed in his mind. At that moment, Mill glanced around and realized he was surrounded by darkness. He couldn't tell how deep into the forest he had ventured and began to feel anxious and panicked, unsure if he could find his way back. The surroundings were pitch black, and everything looked the same in every direction. As Mill tried to figure out how to escape, he clutched the amulet hanging around his neck and prayed earnestly for a way out of the forest. Believe it or not, shortly after his prayer, he noticed a faint light shining in the distance from the direction he had come. The light resembled the glow of the lantern he was holding, and he assumed it must be the hunters searching for him. Without hesitation, Mill ran toward the light. He followed it for a long time and eventually emerged at the stream. This puzzled him greatly because, while following the mysterious man earlier, it had seemed like they had only walked a short distance. But now, running back, the path felt much farther. Mill quickly crossed the stream and ran toward the forest on the other side. The light he had been following continued to shine faintly ahead, and this time he recognized it as coming from the direction of their campsite. Encouraged, he ran again, but as he neared the edge of the forest, the light vanished. Only the glow of the campfire on the hill where the hunters were resting remained. He sprinted up the hill and found Seth sitting by the campfire. Seth immediately questioned him. "Where have you been? Do you know how dangerous that was? I was just about to wake the others to start searching for you." Mill decided to tell Seth everything that had happened. The next morning, the group of hunters decided to investigate the part of the forest where Mill had wandered the previous night, hoping to find some clues. They noticed footprints in the soil. Mill's prints were the only ones visible. Strangely, alongside his tracks were marks that looked like the slithering trail of a snake, as thick as a human arm. As they followed the trail to the large tree where the mysterious man had vanished the night before, they discovered the body of a villager lying beneath the tree. The sight was chilling. This was the same man Mill had encountered the night before. Upon closer inspection of the tree, they noticed a hollow at its base. When one of the hunters approached to investigate, they found a massive king cobra coiled inside the hollow, guarding its eggs. Examining the villager's corpse further, they discovered bite marks from a snake and a horrific detail: 3 cobra eggs stuffed inside the man's mouth. The hunters quickly fashioned tools from wood to help carry the body back. As they worked, one of the hunters noticed another trail leading away from the area. Following it, they found the second missing villager lying unconscious near the stream, not far from where the first body was discovered. The hunters administered first aid to the man and, once he regained consciousness, asked him what had happened. The man recounted his story. While they were gathering forest products, a woman approached them, inviting them to cross into the forest, promising there were rare and valuable resources on the other side. She seemed harmless, so they decided to follow her deeper into the woods. When they reached a large tree, one of his friends noticed a clutch of snake eggs under a hollow. Despite his warnings, the friend insisted on taking the eggs to steep them in alcohol for traditional medicine. As they were preoccupied, a massive king cobra suddenly emerged from behind and struck his friend in the neck. He tried to help but was unsuccessful. Meanwhile, the woman who had led them into the forest stood nearby, laughing with apparent glee as the cobra repeatedly struck his friend. The snake then coiled around the man's neck, squeezing until he died. Realizing he was in grave danger, the man fled and wandered the forest until exhaustion overcame him, leading to his collapse. After the group of hunters heard the villager's story, they escorted the surviving villager back to the village. Seth remarked, "It's fortunate that the villager who died wasn't able to bring the cobra eggs back to the village. If he had, we might have faced devastation across the entire village." Hearing this story, I couldn't help but reflect on the events. Perhaps the 2 villagers had offended some forest spirits, leading to their fates. Alternatively, it might have been sheer greed that drove the man to take the king cobra's eggs, resulting in such a tragic loss. After all, it's natural for beings to fiercely guard what is theirs. As for the spirit of the deceased villager who appeared to Mill, I suspect it was trying to guide Mill to its body. But, of course, this is merely my personal interpretation. The detail about the cobra eggs found in the corpse's mouth remains puzzling. How did that even happen? If there truly are supernatural entities in that forest, what could their purpose have been in placing the eggs there? This, then, is the story of the eerie encounter Mill experienced in the forest, which he shared with us to recount. For those of you listening, I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you have any ideas about the significance of the 3 cobra eggs in the corpse's mouth, please share them in the comments. Before we part ways today, remember that this story is meant purely for entertainment. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support us in continuing to share spine-chilling tales. And if you're someone who loves ghost stories or creepy experiences, let us be the ones to bring the thrill of the supernatural to you.